Well, good morning. It's good to see all of you this morning. Glad for your presence. Through life, we'll have our ups and downs. We'll have our trials and temptations. We'll have our peaks. We'll have good times. We'll be in states of many blessings. We will experience all these things in life. And much of it has to do with how we view our God. Much of it will have to do with our relationship with God. In Genesis chapter 32, we are, as John just read for us just a few moments ago, we are told of the account of when Jacob met God, when Jacob wrestled with God. And a few weeks ago, we talked about the account of Jacob's ladder. And now here we are with the culminating moment where Jacob is really transformed. Transformed from the man he used to be into the man that he will grow into be and be the man of legend. His changed name of Israel. And through Israel he would have his 12 sons, and through those 12 sons would become the nation of Israel. And through that line would eventually become the Messiah. And so here we have basically the first huge step of the promise made from God to Abraham, that through your seed, all the nations of the world will be blessed. And so it took his grandson to really get this going. And so we see when we come to what Jacob is going through on this night, it's a night of transformation for him. He's alone on the Jacob River. He has him and his family, and they're crossing. He's coming to Canaan, and eventually he's going to be meeting Esau after many years of being estranged, and he's leading his family. And they cross the river of Jacob, and he's making sure that they all get on safely. And as they get across, he remains behind for a moment. And as he does, I think all of these things are weighing on him. All of his past deeds, his fears, his anxieties, his worries. He's about to meet his judge, so to speak, by the man that he fled, the man that he wronged, his twin brother. And he's uncertain about his future. There appears a man seemingly out of nowhere who begins to contend with him. And not just a vocal confrontation, but they have a physical confrontation. They wrestle each other to the ground. And he meets him here. God meets him in this form, meets him physically and spiritually in this form of the man. Sometimes it is more often understood that this is an incarnation of the Word. This is an incarnation of Christ before he would come to Christ. A lot of people agree with that summation. We're not exactly told if it was the Father or if it was the Word or if it was the Spirit who made himself manifest right there. But it seems very much like that it would, at least not right here, that it is the manifestation of the Word. And so this struggle begins between them. And it lasts all night. It's intense. It's personal. And it ends up being transformative. And so Jacob is wrestling with the symbol of every human struggle that we might ever deal with in this culminating moment in this struggle with God. And if we're going to apply this to ourselves, we struggle with God through our whole lives, right? We struggle with Him with our fears and our doubts and our desires. We struggle sometimes if He even exists. We struggle sometimes if whether or not we are being called to act in a certain way or called to serve in a certain way, or if we're just not comfortable with what God's plan might be for me, or if I may not be comfortable with what God requires of me, His edicts, His laws, or whatever they might be. Those are the ideas that humans will wrestle with God. And so in this, physical act that Jacob had with God, there was a spiritual message to that as well, and something that we can take apart and something we can kind of apply it to our lives as well. So let's take a look at all the things that Jacob was going through and seeing if we can't relate in any way. First off, it seems that Jacob was wrestling with his reality. Jacob's alone. Jacob, night surrounds him. The river separates him now from safety and his past life. When he crosses the river, that's going to lead to his judge, to Esau. He's facing the consequences of his deceit. He's facing the consequences of his sin. He's uncertain how Esau will react to his presence. The last time that they met, he threatened to kill him. He was going every aspect of Esau wanted to come down on Jacob, and Jacob had to flee for his own survival. And so as this wrestling begins, Jacob must confront reality as it is, and not as he wishes it to be. He might wish that he could wish, all of the things that he had done prior away. He might wish that he doesn't even have to contend with his brother at all, that all the sins that he committed in the past, they could just not have any consequence on his state of being now. But there's a lot of symbols here. There's this darkness that it's the dark of night, and there's this sense of fear and foreboding sometimes the darkness can exude. There's this chaotic form that Jacob just has an uncertainty of what's coming in the future. But through this space, through that river that separated him and his family at this point where he was alone, this would be the threshold of change and the turning point in his life. And then when he's involved in the wrestling, that's his active engagement in what the unknown is. He doesn't even know exactly what's going to be the outcome of his confrontation here. But his fear can't be bypassed in this situation. He has to confront it. And so we, as humans, we'll wrestle with certain things in our lives. We'll wrestle with our own reality. We'll wrestle sometimes with illness. We'll sometimes wrestle with our age. Sometimes we wrestle with loss. Sometimes it's injustice. And sometimes it's just existential questions. The existence of God and my place in the universe, does it all have some sort of meaning? What is the meaning of it all? We ask those questions. We struggle to accept God's sovereignty, His timing, and His presence in our lives as well. And like Jacob, we can't ever move forward without confronting the truth of our circumstance and God's reality, the reality of the situation that we live in God's world, instead of living in our own and just focusing on our own wants, our own needs, our own desires. God calls us to something greater. God calls us to a life of sacrifice. And facing God honestly begins with accepting that reality. It extends that our lives are more than just what we see through our sockets. Each and every one of us sees our life through our own perception. We couldn't see it from any other way but our own. We don't see our own faces unless we look in the mirror. We look at our hands, we look at our feet and our movements. All of these things that we do from day to day are from our perspective. And so it's very easy to think about the only person that we see, or the only person that we're experiencing our life through is our own. And it's very easy to just get wrapped up in what we're doing when God calls us to something greater. God calls us to take other people's wants, needs, and desires before our own, to live sacrificially in that way, to live for others instead of living for ourselves. And so that brings us to the next point, that in wrestling with God, we wrestle with ourselves. We wrestle with our identity. We wrestle sometimes with our guilt and sometimes our moral responsibility. Jacob, he wrestles all night physically with God. And it sort of symbolizes his inner struggle of his past actions, of his past ambitions, and his self-perception. He understands in this moment of confrontation with this man that this is not just no ordinary man. The man tells him to let go, and he says, "No, I will not let go until you bless me." This shows his persistence. It shows his courage and his desire for reconciliation and transformation. In this moment, Jacob knows that this is something, there's more to it than struggle with a random person or a random robber or wherever it might be. This is no ordinary person. He sees it finally as this is my moment of change. This is the moment where all of the things in my life that I can overcome them and go to the next part. And so when he asks him of his name, he says, "Well, my name is Jacob." He said, "No longer are you Jacob, but now you shall be called Israel." God touches his hip, leaving him a limp. His hip becomes out of socket. And so Jacob emerges forever changed, physically and spiritually in this moment. When God renames him Israel, the name Israel means he who wrestles with God. And it links his past struggles with his identity and purpose. He's going to continue to struggle. He's going to continue to wrestle, but now it's going to be under a new identity. It's going to be under a new mission and under a new path that's set in front of him. So, in his physical struggle, we can see that, this is another instance of confronting our deepest doubts. We will confront our failings and desires when we are confronted with that moment with God. Not that we will experience the same as Jacob did, but we experience that confrontation in our own ways, in some kind of spiritual way. His hip injury was that mark of transformation. It was an outside sign of what was going on within him. And true encounters with God in ways that we can't deny, in ways that we can't even sometimes fathom or completely understand, will change us, will leave a permanent change. And the new name he takes is the identity forged through his past struggles, his blessing, and then his divine recognition that he is on this path that God is setting him on. We might wrestle with our past mistakes. We might wrestle with our moral failures at times and our desire for acceptance. But struggle sometimes, or oftentimes, is just part of spiritual growth. We're going to have those struggles in our lives. But we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be persistent in our goal to try to have a relationship with our God through prayer, and willing to let God shape our identity, shape our lives, shape our moral compass even. Like Jacob, if we do all those things, we can't help to leave but be changed. We can't leave that encounter unchanged. So God transforms those who grapple with themselves honestly and with themselves, and those who avoid the struggle. You just think about those of you who have experienced conversion from where your past life is to your next, the one that is now, and how you came to God, and how you came to understand and be obedient to His Word, the moment that you were baptized, and then rise out of the water and newness of life, and how you started that journey yourself. When we finally surrender to the obedience of God and to His servitude, we're changed. We can't help but be. But we also have to understand that that's not the end point, that is only the beginning. We will grow in our life with God. The next point of how Jacob was wrestling here is that he was wrestling with a certain amount of trust. His wrestling lasts until daybreak. He can't see clearly, but yet so he persists. And then God blesses his struggle. And this blessing is inseparable from the actual wrestling that went on. And Jacob's limp is going to remind him of that dependence and perseverance that he had to go through. And his new name will symbolizes his alignment with his new purpose in life, is to bring on the blessing that Abraham promised, or that God was promised by Abraham. He's just the next step in bringing forth the Messiah into the world. And so we might wrestle with trusting God's plan, especially when we are going through our own suffering of life. When we are going through trials of life, it's really, really hard to see God's plan in it. It's really hard to see anything good coming out with a horrible situation. And that might be many, many things. That might be some kind of separation in a home life. It might come from a separation of spouses. Sometimes it might come from a loss of loved ones. Sometimes it might come through a change in direction of our career. Sometimes a loss of career can do that. But through all those things that we might go through, if there is trust in God, and true trust is active, the way that we wrestle with God in those moments can bring clarity, can bring faith, and they can bring blessing. Jacob's story shows that wrestling with God is both a confrontation of reality, it's a confrontation with ourselves, it's a confrontation with our trust in God. Because ultimately, He is the master of the universe. He is in control. But sometimes it's hard for us to let that go. We're prideful people. We are inherently so. We want to make sure that we want to feel in control. But every time that we focus on us being in control, God will let you know that we're not in control, that He's in control. I mentioned this several times when we studied this about the kings of the divided kingdom. But King Asa found this out the hard way. King Asa, who was the great-grandson of David, was a good king. He was a great king. He was one of the best kings that ever lived. He made sure that all the mistakes of his predecessors were wiped clean. He made sure that he reinstilled the love of God into the hearts of the people. He reinstituted the priesthood and how important it was to the Jewish identity. How important it was to abide by the laws of God. He brought back sacrifice. He brought back all the things and the tenets of the law and created a great nation. And he ruled for 40 years. But then at the end of his life, something changed. Now, he didn't suddenly become evil. He didn't go back on all these things. But he lost his purpose. See, the beginning of his kingship, he intended to serve God and bring God's edicts into the hearts of the people. And then at the end, he saw all the blessings that God had done for him. He saw all of the prosperous nation and the powerful nation that Israel had become. And he started to think, this is because of me. I'm the reason that this is the way it is. I'm the reason that things are going so good. And he wanted to forget God entirely. And when he was at the end of his life and he got sick, he got sick and feeble with a horrible disease that was going to claim his life. The priests that tended to him say, ask God to heal you. Ask God to help you, to give you the strength to overcome this. And he didn't want to. He didn't want God's help anymore. He didn't think it was important to. And so he would lose his life because he became stubborn, because he started thinking about himself instead of serving God and others. We see that pattern throughout Scripture. And I'm sure you've seen that pattern either maybe in your life or someone adjacent to your life, that every human will wrestle. Every human will wrestle with doubt, these moral struggles that we come in contact with, the trust or despair. And it's part of our encounter with God. But like Jacob, we may leave marked, transformed, and renamed, and prepared for blessings, prepared for purpose, and prepared for a deeper relationship with God. And those are the things that we need to strive for. Those are the things that we need to seek. Seeking first the kingdom, and all of these blessings will be added unto you, says Jesus. So we have to step into our struggle, step into our wrestle with God. And we have to wrestle with God honestly, persistently, and courageously. And in the end, we'll leave changed, strengthened, and aligned with his life as he has called us to live. And just so Jacob was transformed, so can we be in our lives. And so as I hope that as we've gone through this morning, that there's something that's been spoke that speaks to you, that we can take something from this and apply it to our lives. If there's someone here this morning who has accepted the Lord's invitation in any way, whether it is to be transformed, to become a Christian yourself, we'll gladly help you on that fact. If you're ready, we'll gladly baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and you can start living a transformed life as well. Perhaps you've already done that this morning, but you need the prayers and the encouragement of your brothers and sisters this morning. Let us also help you. It's not a race, it's a struggle that we all go through life, and we want to make sure everybody passes the finish line. So if there's any need to come, you can make those things known this morning as we stand and as we sing.